My name is Claire, and I was 27 when my father ruined Thanksgiving with just 3 words. Sell the house. The clinking of silverware had just quieted. My aunt was pouring gravy, cousins were laughing, and for one brief second, the holiday felt normal. Then my father cleared his throat, leaned back in his chair, and dropped the bomb in front of everyone. "We've all talked about it," he said, nodding toward my mother and my younger brother, Daniel. "It's time to sell the family house. Claire doesn't need it. Daniel will handle the money." The table went silent. My fork froze midair. Every pair of eyes swung toward me like I was on trial. Daniel smirked. My mother gave her sharp, approving nod, and a few relatives chuckled nervously. I felt the heat rush to my cheeks as whispers spread down the table. Guess she wasn't responsible enough. Daniel's always been the strong one. I opened my mouth, but my father cut me off. "Don't start, Claire. You're not equipped to manage property. You'll just drag us down. This is what's best for the family." The house wasn't just a house. It was my grandmother's, the place where I had taken my first steps, where every holiday had once felt magical. And now, in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner, they were stripping it from me like it was nothing more than an old piece of furniture to discard. I sat there frozen, trying to hold back tears as Daniel raised his glass in a mock toast. "To new beginnings," he said smugly. What I didn't know that night was how fast their betrayal would move. Because 3 days later, I learned the house was already gone. If you had been sitting at that Thanksgiving table, you might have thought my father's announcement was just a practical decision, maybe even a reasonable one. But it wasn't. That moment was the final strike in a lifetime of being treated like the extra piece in my own family, the one who never really belonged. It had always been clear who the star was. My younger brother Daniel was the golden child, the one my parents bragged about at every dinner party, the one who could do no wrong. And me, I was the scapegoat, the one they tolerated but never celebrated. I still remember my 12th birthday. I woke up to silence, no balloons, no cake, not even a card. That evening, I sat in the living room, watching as my parents bustled around, decorating the dining room. I thought maybe they had planned a surprise. But then the guests arrived, arms full of gifts, all for Daniel. He was turning 10 the next week, but they decided to combine the parties to save money. He blew out candles while everyone cheered, and I sat at the corner of the table, pretending not to care that no one even remembered it was my special day. Years later, the same pattern repeated. My high school graduation was supposed to be a proud milestone. I searched the crowd for my parents as I walked across the stage. I saw them, but only briefly. The moment Daniel's phone buzzed with a reminder about his soccer game, they stood up and left. By the time I threw my cap in the air, their chairs were empty. They missed my speech, my moment. That night, instead of a celebratory dinner, I came home to leftovers on the counter and a note. "We're at Daniel's game, heat this up if you're hungry." The worst sting came when I landed my first real job offer after college. I'd worked endless nights, juggling classes, and part-time shifts to prove I could stand on my own. When the offer letter finally came, I walked into the kitchen, grinning from ear to ear. "Dad, Mom, I got the job. They want me to start next month." I expected pride, maybe a hug. Instead, my father didn't even look up from his laptop. "That's nice, Claire, but don't get too comfortable. You don't have the stamina for real responsibility." Daniel, leaning against the counter, laughed. "Yeah, let's be honest, you'll quit in a week." My mother didn't defend me. She just nodded in agreement, as if my brother had spoken a universal truth. That's how it always was. Daniel could crash the car, miss practices, or fail a class, and my parents would excuse it as a rough patch. I could achieve something real, and they'd brush it off as luck or temporary. No matter what I did, I was invisible next to him. The only person who ever seemed to see me was my grandmother. She had lived in that old house for decades, the one they tried to strip from me. I used to sit with her in the living room while she told me stories about how she and my grandfather built it brick by brick. "This house is more than walls, Claire," she'd whisper as we sipped tea. "It's proof that we endured. One day, it will protect you, too." When she passed, the house legally became part of the estate, half mine, half Daniel's. But from the moment the will was read, I could see the resentment in his eyes. He wanted it all. For years, I clung to my grandmother's words as a lifeline. I told myself that if I just kept working, if I just kept holding on, things would change. I thought maybe one day my parents would see me differently. Maybe they would finally say, "We're proud of you, Claire." But I should have known better, Because if there's one thing I learned, it's that favoritism doesn't fade. It calcifies. It becomes the lens through which they see everything. So when my father slammed down his fork that Thanksgiving and announced, "Sell the house," I shouldn't have been surprised. To him, it was logical. To Daniel, it was victory. To my mother, it was just another way of keeping the family's weak link in her place. But for me, it was the moment everything crystallized. The house wasn't just a house. It was my grandmother's legacy. It was the only thing that ever made me feel like I had a claim to something real. And in front of a table full of relatives, they tried to rip it away. I thought maybe it was just talk, another cruel attempt to belittle me. But I was wrong, because 3 days later, I discovered the papers had already been signed. And the house, my house, was gone. I kept telling myself my father's words at Thanksgiving were just talk. Maybe it was another one of his power plays, another way to put me down in front of the relatives. I thought surely they couldn't actually take the house without me. I was wrong. 3 days later, I got a call from the county office. At first, I thought it was a mistake. The woman on the phone spoke so matter-of-factly. "Miss Claire, we're just confirming the property transfer has been processed. The family residence on Maplewood Lane is no longer in your name." I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "What do you mean? That house can't be sold without me. My name's on the deed." "Yes," she replied calmly, "but the documents filed had signatures from your parents and your brother. They claimed your consent was implied." I nearly dropped the phone. Implied? How could anyone think silence was consent? I raced to my parents' house, my heart pounding. Daniel opened the door with that smug grin I'd grown to hate. "Well, look who's here," he said, leaning casually against the frame. "You heard, huh?" I pushed past him into the living room. My parents were sitting there, calm as ever, sipping coffee like they hadn't just ripped my world apart. "How could you do this?" I shouted. "The house was half mine. You had no right." My father didn't even flinch. "Claire, stop being dramatic. You were never going to manage that property. We did what was best for the family. Daniel will take care of the money. It's already done." I stared at them, my chest tight, my throat burning. "Best for the family? You mean best for Daniel? You sold it behind my back. Do you have any idea what that house meant to me? To Grandma?" My mother rolled her eyes. "Your grandmother left it to both of you, not just you. Stop pretending you were entitled to it. You never had the backbone to take care of it. At least Daniel can put the money to good use." Daniel smirked, leaning back on the couch. "Face it, Claire, you were never cut out for this. The house is gone. Move on." Their words hit me like a tidal wave. My grandmother's legacy, the place that had always felt like a safe haven, was gone, sold like it was nothing more than a line item in their accounts. My parents dismissed my outrage. Daniel gloated in his victory, and I stood there, humiliated, realizing that my voice had never mattered in their eyes. I wanted to fight back, but I felt cornered. It was 3 against 1, and the deal was already done. They had the papers, the money, and the smug satisfaction of watching me break. But then Daniel leaned forward, his grin widening. "Don't look so crushed, sis. It's not like you could have stopped us. You're too soft, too weak. You always have been, and you always will be." The words burned hotter than anything he could have done. Too weak, always weak. That's what they all believed. And in that moment, as much as I hated to admit it, part of me believed it too. I left their house with tears in my eyes, my fists clenched, my heart pounding with a mix of rage and despair. They thought it was over. They thought I'd finally been silenced for good. But they didn't know what was coming next. Because sometimes, when you think someone is too weak to fight, that's when they surprise you the most. I thought the betrayal had reached its peak when I learned the house was already gone. But my family wasn't finished. They wanted more than my silence. They wanted my humiliation. The confrontation came just days later. My aunt invited me to what she claimed was a family check-in. I almost didn't go, but something in me still wanted answers. I wanted to believe there was some shred of decency left, some chance they'd see how wrong they were. The moment I walked into the banquet hall, though, I realized it wasn't a check-in. It was an ambush. My parents sat at the front, Daniel by their side, and the room was filled with relatives and neighbors. The air was thick with curiosity, people whispering as I took a seat near the back. My father cleared his throat and stood. "We all know why we're here. The family property has been sold. It was the right decision, and Daniel will manage the proceeds responsibly. Claire has agreed to step aside." My chest tightened. Step aside? I hadn't agreed to anything. I shot to my feet. That's a lie. I never agreed. You sold it behind my back. Gasps rippled through the room. Some looked at me with pity, others with disdain. My mother smiled thinly, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Claire, don't embarrass yourself. Everyone knows you couldn't handle the responsibility. We spared you the burden. Laughter broke out at the table nearest to them. Daniel leaned back in his chair, smug as ever. She's just bitter. Always has been. She should be thanking us for saving her from herself. I felt the heat rising to my face, my hands trembling. That house was mine too. Grandma wanted me to have it just as much as Daniel. My father's voice thundered across the hall. Enough! You always twist things to make yourself the victim. The truth is, you were never capable. We did what had to be done. Relatives whispered louder now, some shaking their heads, others smirking. I could hear them. She's always been dramatic. Daniel's the strong one. He'll take care of it. The humiliation pressed down on me like a weight. I wanted to scream, to run, to disappear. But before I could move, Daniel stood, picked up the microphone, and looked straight at me. Claire, he said, his voice booming, you've always been weak. You can't handle pressure. You can't handle property. You can't even handle yourself. Everyone here knows it. Stop pretending you're equal to me. The room fell silent, all eyes on me. My cheeks burned, tears threatened to spill, and for a moment, I felt 12 years old again, the forgotten birthday girl sitting in the corner while Daniel soaked up the applause. But then, I saw it. A faint red light blinking from the corner of the room. One of the cousins was holding up a phone, angled toward the stage. Recording, streaming. My mother followed my gaze and smiled cruelly. Let them watch. Maybe now the world will see the truth about you. Daniel smirked and shoved the microphone closer to my face. Go ahead, Claire. Tell everyone how unfair at Island. Tell them you were robbed. Then they'll all see what I already know: you're too weak to fight us. The words hit me like a slap, but something inside me shifted. For the first time in my life, I didn't crumble. I straightened my shoulders, met his eyes, and let my voice cut through the silence. No, I said firmly. I'm not weak. And you're about to find out just how wrong you are. The room stirred, whispers swelling into a murmur. My parents exchanged uneasy glances. Daniel laughed, waving me off. Big words, Claire. But words don't win battles. You'll never beat us. And then it happened. The doors at the back of the hall opened with a heavy creak. Every head turned. And in that instant, I knew the fight wasn't mine alone anymore. Someone had come, someone who would change everything. The doors at the back of the hall creaked open, but no one paid attention at first. Every eye was still on me, every ear waiting for me to stumble, to break, to prove Daniel right. My father's glare was fixed, my mother's smile sharp, and Daniel held the microphone like a weapon, ready to cut me down again. Go on, Claire, he said smugly. Tell them. Tell everyone how unfair Life Island. Cry if you want. Maybe then you'll finally admit it. You'll never be strong enough to fight us. The words landed like a slap, but this time, I didn't flinch. I felt the weight of years of silence pressing against me, but instead of caving, I stood taller. My voice shook at first, but then it steadied. I don't need to cry, I said, staring straight at him, and I'm not weak. The only weakness here is the kind that steals from family and calls it strength. Gasps rippled through the room. My father's hand slammed against the table, rattling the glasses. Enough! You're humiliating yourself, Claire. Do you really want everyone here to see how pathetic you are? But the thing was, they already had, and not in the way he thought. Because out of the corner of my eye, I saw that blinking red light again. A cousin near the back was still holding his phone high, the live stream rolling. I watched as whispers spread across the hall. It's live. People are watching. Oh my God, this is already online. Daniel finally noticed. He froze for a split second, then barked a laugh to cover his nerves. Good. Let them watch. Let them see her make a fool of herself. Let them see how weak she really island. But for the first time, the murmurs didn't sound like laughter at me. They sounded like judgment aimed at them. My parents, my brother, their arrogance. I steadied my breathing, letting the silence stretch before I spoke again. The world is watching, Daniel, and the truth is showing. You didn't sell that house because I was weak. You sold it because you knew I was stronger than you'll ever admit. Strong enough to hold on to Grandma's legacy when you wanted to throw it away. The crowd stirred, eyes widening. A few relatives shifted uncomfortably, no longer smirking. Daniel's face flushed red. He jabbed the microphone back toward me, his voice cracking now with rage. "You think this is over? You think a few words will make you strong? You'll regret this, Claire. You always regret standing against us." My mother hissed. "Sit down before you destroy what little dignity you have left." But I didn't sit. I stood firm, feeling the weight of the live stream behind me, the blinking red dot capturing every sneer, every insult, every desperate attempt they made to break me. For the first time, I wasn't the one being humiliated. I met Daniel's glare and said clearly, "I'm not the one destroying my dignity. You are. And now everyone can see it." The hall fell silent. The only sound was the faint creak of the door swinging wider. A shadow stretched across the floor, heads began to turn, and then, in the middle of the tension, a new voice broke through. Calm, steady, commanding. "Actually," the voice said, "she's right." The entire room spun toward the back. And there, framed in the doorway, stood the ally. I never expected to have the one person who could shatter my family's lies and turn their smug confidence into ash. "Actually," the voice repeated, smooth and steady, "she's right." The hall went silent. Every chair turned toward the back, where a tall man in a tailored suit strode in, briefcase in hand. His presence filled the room instantly, a quiet authority that made even the loudest whispers die out. My stomach twisted. I knew who he was. Mr. Harris, the CEO of the company I'd been interning for, the man I had been quietly working under for months. My brother's smirk faltered. My father stiffened. My mother blinked rapidly, as if trying to figure out why someone of his stature was standing in a dusty community hall filled with gossiping relatives. Mr. Harris walked straight down the aisle and set his briefcase on the table. He didn't raise his voice, but every word carried. "I've been following the situation regarding this property." And thanks to that live stream, he nodded toward the blinking phone still held high. "The truth is clear." Daniel tried to recover, forcing a laugh. "This is a private family matter. You really shouldn't." But Mr. Harris cut him off with a look. "Family matter? No. What I saw was coercion, threats, and an attempt to strip Claire of rights that are legally hers. That's not family. That's exploitation." Gasps spread through the room. My father's face turned red. "Now hold on a second. You don't know the full story." "I know enough," Mr. Harris snapped. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table toward me. "Claire, I reviewed the property transfer. It's invalid." My breath caught. "Invalid?" He nodded. "They filed it without your signature. In this state, both beneficiaries must agree. Without your consent, the sale cannot be finalized. So, which means," he looked directly at Daniel, "the house is not gone. It's still half yours." Daniel's face drained of color. My mother stammered, "That can't be right. We filed everything. Mr. Harris raised a hand. "You forged consent. That's fraud. If you continue pushing this, you won't just lose the house, you'll face legal consequences." The whispers turned into shocked gasps. Relatives shifted in their seats, exchanging wide-eyed glances. The livestream was still rolling, capturing every word, every twist. I sat frozen, my heart pounding as the weight of his words sank in. The house wasn't gone. They hadn't beaten me. "Mr. Harris turned back to me, his voice softer now. "Claire, I've watched you work these last months. You've proven yourself in ways your family has never acknowledged. That's why I came tonight. Not just to defend your rights, but to make something clear." He reached into his folder again and placed another document in front of me. "You've been selected for our leadership program. Starting next quarter, you'll be managing projects under my direct supervision. It comes with a stipend, housing support, and a contract that is legally yours alone. No one here has the power to take it from you." The room erupted, gasps, murmurs, even applause from a few distant relatives who had grown tired of Daniel's arrogance. Daniel slammed his fist on the table. "This is ridiculous. She's weak. She's nothing. You can't seriously believe she's capable of—" "Enough!" Mr. Harris's voice cracked like thunder. He leaned forward, eyes blazing. "I've seen her work. I've seen her dedication. She's stronger than all of you combined. And tonight, thanks to that live stream, everyone else has seen who the real weak ones are." Daniel's mouth fell open, but no words came out. My father sat rigid, his hands clenched into fists. My mother stared at the table, her face pale. I touched the papers with trembling fingers, my chest tight with relief. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. For the first time, someone of authority had said the words I had been desperate to hear my whole life. "You're strong." Mr. Harris looked at me one last time. "You don't need their approval anymore, Claire. The house is still yours. Your future is yours. Don't let them convince you otherwise." The applause started again, louder this time, filling the hall with a sound I never thought I'd hear directed at me. For once, I wasn't being mocked or pitied. I was being recognized, and in that moment I realized the humiliation no longer belonged to me. It belonged to them. The sound of applause in that hall is something I'll never forget. For once, the clapping wasn't for Daniel. It wasn't for my parents either. It was for me. The girl who had spent her whole life being called weak, invisible, not enough. In that moment, I was the one standing tall, while they sat frozen in silence. When the meeting ended, my parents and Daniel rushed out without saying a word. No gloating this time, no smirks, no raised glasses, just silence. And shame trailing behind them. The relatives who had laughed at me earlier avoided my eyes as I left. Some of them even muttered quick congratulations under their breath, as if they suddenly wanted to be on my side. But I didn't need their words anymore. The live stream had already captured everything, and the truth was spreading faster than gossip ever could. By the next morning, my phone was buzzing non-stop. Messages from neighbors, coworkers, even old friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Screenshots of the video. Comments under the clip. Some were outraged, others were sympathetic, but the common thread was clear. Everyone finally saw what I had endured my whole life. Daniel's downfall started almost immediately. For years, he had been paraded as the golden child, talented, charming, destined for success. He had built his reputation on being untouchable. But now, people weren't buying it anymore. His friends pulled away. Professors who once favored him stopped responding to his emails. Online, his name became linked to the slap of betrayal, the smirk of arrogance, the words, "She's too weak to fight us." He tried to spin it, of course. He posted about being misunderstood, about family disagreements being blown out of proportion, but the comments told a different story. You don't humiliate your sister in front of a crowd. Strength isn't stealing what isn't yours. This isn't family, it's greed. The sponsors he'd been courting for his projects quietly backed out. Invitations stopped coming. Daniel, the boy who had been praised since birth, suddenly found himself standing in silence, and the silence crushed him more than any insult ever could. My father faced a different kind of collapse. His business had always depended on his reputation as a trustworthy, family-first man. He had worn that image like armor. But the live stream stripped it away in a single night. Clients who had admired him now whispered about him behind closed doors. Longtime partners pulled out of contracts, unwilling to be associated with a man caught threatening to coerce his own daughter. I heard one of his colleagues say, if he'd betray his daughter over property, what's stopping him from betraying us over money? And just like that, decades of cultivated respect began to crumble. My mother's unraveling was quieter, but just as painful for her. She had always thrived in church groups, charity events, neighborhood committees, spaces where she could show off Daniel and bask in reflected glory. But now, when she walked into those rooms, the atmosphere shifted. Women who once praised her now exchanged pitying glances. Conversations hushed when she approached. Invitations that used to flood in suddenly stopped. She tried to act as though it didn't bother her, but I knew her well enough to see the truth. She could live without money, but she couldn't live without admiration. And admiration had vanished. Meanwhile, my life began to change in ways I never imagined. The CEO kept his promise. I officially entered the leadership program, surrounded by mentors who valued me for my work, not my last name. For the first time, I wasn't being compared, dismissed, or silenced. I was being encouraged, supported, celebrated. The house, the one they had tried to rip away from me, was secured in my name. I remember walking through the front door after the legal dust settled, running my fingers along the banister, inhaling the scent of the old wood. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was proof that my grandmother had been right. It was my future, my foundation, and no one could take it from me again. I settled into a rhythm that felt foreign at first. Peace. I could wake up in the mornings without bracing myself for insults. I could eat dinner without silence pressing against me like a wall. I could focus on my work, my friendships, my future, without worrying that everything I built would be dismissed as worthless. It wasn't about revenge anymore. Watching Daniel lose his friends, seeing my father's business contracts collapse, noticing my mother's calendar empty out, those things didn't bring me joy. They didn't heal the wounds of birthdays forgotten or graduations ignored. What healed me was realizing that I didn't need them anymore. Their downfall wasn't my victory. My freedom was. Sometimes I still hear Daniel's voice in my head. You're too weak to fight us. But when I hear it now, it doesn't sting. It makes me smile. Because he was wrong. The fight didn't require screaming, fists, or forged papers. The fight required patience, resilience, refusal. I didn't need to outshout them. I just needed to outlast them. And I did. The family that once treated me like a liability now lives under the shadow of their own actions. And me, I live in the light of peace I carved out for myself. My grandmother's house stands as proof. My career blooms as proof. My own voice, no longer trembling, is proof. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet refusal to break. And in the end, that's what saved me. When I walk through the front door of my grandmother's house now, I don't just see walls and furniture. I see everything I fought for and everything they tried to take from me. I see the little girl who once sat in this living room, invisible, begging for her parents to notice her. I see the young woman who carried insult after insult, convinced she wasn't strong enough to stand tall. And I see the version of me who finally refused to bend, who refused to sign, who refused to stay silent. The scars are still there. I won't pretend otherwise. I can still hear my father's voice thundering at me to sign the papers. I can still see Daniel's smirk as he told me I was too weak to fight them. I can still feel the heat of humiliation as relatives whispered and laughed. Those memories don't vanish just because the truth came out, but they've changed. They're no longer chains around my neck. They're reminders of what I survived. The biggest lesson I carry is this: blood doesn't entitle anyone to your loyalty. Respect does, love does, support does. And if your family can't give you that, then you have every right to build a life without them. A house may hold memories, but respect is the foundation you can't live without. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it's saying no when everyone expects you to crumble. Sometimes it's walking out of a room with nothing but your dignity and discovering that's more powerful than anything they tried to strip away. When I stood in that hall, humiliated, cornered, called weak in front of everyone, I thought I had lost everything. But what I didn't realize was that I was about to gain the one thing I'd been denied all my life: freedom. Not just freedom to keep my grandmother's house, but freedom to live without their approval. Freedom to finally believe in myself, even if they never did. So now, when I hear Daniel's words echo, "You're too weak to fight us," I let them play in my mind like a song that's lost its sting. Because those words turned out to be the biggest lie of all. I wasn't weak. I was strong enough to outlast them, strong enough to wait for the right moment, strong enough to prove them wrong. And the sweetest part? I didn't need revenge to feel whole. I only needed peace, and peace is non-negotiable. So let me ask you, if your father announced at Thanksgiving that you had to sell your home, would you bow your head and give it away? Or would you fight to keep what was yours? Even if the whole world told you you were too weak?